In this podcast episode, three leading voices, Deborah Frances-White, Louise Perry, and Erica Komisar, delve into the complexities and contradictions of modern feminism, the sexual revolution, and the evolving roles of women and men in society. The sexual revolution of the 1960s and 1970s marked a profound ideological and material shift in society. Louise Perry explains that it wasn't just about sexual relationships, but a broader questioning of traditional Christian values and norms. The introduction of the contraceptive pill, safe abortion, and domestic technologies like washing machines radically altered women's lives, enabling them to enter the workforce en masse and reshape family dynamics. These changes, while monumental, also created new cultural assumptions, such as the idea that sex could be consequence-free, which have had mixed outcomes. Erica Komisar adds nuance by emphasizing that while the sexual revolution granted women agency, autonomy, and some emotional freedom, it also introduced pressures and contradictions. The expectation that every woman should embrace free sex or prioritize career over motherhood has not universally resonated. Many women feel caught between societal demands and personal desires, leading to confusion and emotional strain. The revolution's promise of liberation is complicated by the reality that freedom without structure can leave individuals feeling untethered and isolated. A significant portion of the discussion centers on the rise of hookup culture and its psychological toll, especially on young women. Erica highlights alarming statistics showing that 82% of young women report feelings of depression and anxiety following casual sexual encounters. This culture, fueled by apps like Tinder and societal acceptance of casual sex, often leaves young people emotionally vulnerable and confused about intimacy. Louise Perry points out that hookup culture tends to favor male sociosexual preferences, which are generally more unrestricted than those of women. On university campuses where women outnumber men, hookup culture is more prevalent, often because men become the scarce resource and set the terms. However, many young women engage in casual sex not out of desire, but due to social pressure, leading to regret and emotional distress. The lack of emotional connection in these encounters contrasts sharply with the deeper relational needs that many women have. The panel debates the idea of whether women need rules or structure in their lives to navigate freedom healthily. Louise warns against imposing rigid rules on women, equating such constraints with oppressive regimes like those in Iran or Afghanistan. She argues that modern society already imposes enough structure through work, social expectations, and relationship norms, and that women should be trusted to make their own choices without additional societal policing. In contrast, Erica advocates for a balanced approach, emphasizing that freedom without boundaries can be harmful, especially for young people still developing emotionally and neurologically. She stresses the importance of education that goes beyond sex education to include emotional connection, relationship skills, and self-awareness. This structure, she argues, is not about control, but about equipping young people to make informed, autonomous decisions that protect their mental health. Erica Komisar identifies herself as a maternal feminist, a strand of feminism that values and elevates motherhood as vital and powerful work. She critiques the second wave of feminism for dismissing motherhood as drudgery and for promoting the idea that women should aspire to be like men professionally and sexually. This, she argues, has led to a devaluation of maternal roles and contributed to societal pressures that make motherhood more difficult and less respected. Louise Perry echoes this sentiment, highlighting how contemporary policies often punish stay-at-home mothers through tax systems and lack of support, while subsidizing daycare to push women back into the workforce. She calls for a feminism that admires and supports all women's choices, whether they choose to work outside the home or dedicate themselves to raising children. Both guests emphasize that motherhood should be recognized as a legitimate and valuable life path, deserving of societal admiration and support. A particularly poignant part of the conversation focuses on the impact of daycare on children under 3 years old. Erica explains that infants require consistent, sensitive caregiving to develop emotional regulation and mental health. Group daycare settings, often understaffed and overstimulating, fail to provide the necessary one-on-one attention, leading to increased stress and developmental challenges. Louise shares her personal commitment to avoiding daycare for her children, despite the financial and logistical difficulties involved. Both guests criticize government policies that funnel families into daycare by offering subsidies only for institutional care, rather than supporting alternatives like nannies, shared caregiving, or extended family involvement. They argue that society is doing a disservice to children by not prioritizing early attachment and emotional security. The panel acknowledges the harsh economic realities many women face today, including professionals like nurses who struggle to afford housing and basic necessities despite full-time work. Deborah Frances-White highlights the immense pressures on working mothers who juggle demanding jobs with caregiving responsibilities, often without adequate societal support. Louise Perry points out that capitalism and government policies have not adapted to the needs of modern families, forcing many women into untenable situations. She calls for systemic changes, such as paid parental leave, flexible work arrangements, and financial incentives that recognize the value of caregiving. The conversation underscores that individual choice is constrained by economic structures, and without policy reform, many women have no real option but to rely on daycare or work multiple jobs. A striking part of the discussion revolves around the Lost Boys report and the rise of the Manosphere, a network of online communities focused on men's rights, often opposing feminism. The report highlights alarming trends: boys falling behind in education, higher rates of mental health issues, and economic disenfranchisement. Young men are increasingly feeling lost, isolated, and fearful of women's growing social power. Louise Perry attributes much of this crisis not to feminism, but to broader technological and economic shifts that have devalued traditionally male-dominated blue-collar work. Deborah emphasizes the need to nurture boys emotionally and socially, countering toxic narratives that pit men against women. The panel agrees that society must find ways to support young men's development and integration without rolling back women's hard-won rights. The conversation explores the complex interplay between gender roles, privileges, and responsibilities. Louise Perry notes that traditional gender roles came with both benefits and burdens. Men had privileges but also responsibilities like physical labor and risk-taking, while women had caregiving roles that were undervalued. Today, both sexes often seek privileges without corresponding responsibilities, leading to social dysfunction. Deborah Frances-White stresses that feminism must acknowledge these dynamics and work toward a balanced society where both men and women share responsibilities and are respected for their contributions. The panel critiques extremes on both sides, whether it's men feeling powerless or women feeling pressured to do it all, and calls for a middle ground that honors the diversity of human experience. Pornography emerges as a contentious topic, with all guests agreeing on its problematic aspects. Louise Perry condemns the porn industry for its exploitation and harm to women, calling it incompatible with feminist values. Erica and Deborah discuss how modern porn, especially video-based and hyper-stimulating content, can distort sexual expectations, contribute to addiction, and impair real-life intimacy. The panel debates whether pornography can ever be a positive force or if it should be regulated or even banned. They acknowledge its deep roots in human sexuality, but emphasize the need for honest conversations about its impact on mental health, relationships, and societal attitudes towards sex and consent. The guests reflect on what it means to be a good man today and how boys should be raised. Louise Perry highlights the challenge of channeling young men's energy constructively, advocating for activities like combat sports to help regulate aggression. Deborah Frances-White counters by emphasizing empathy and humanity over traditional masculine roles, warning against reinforcing restrictive gender norms. Erica Komisar points to neurological and hormonal differences between boys and girls, suggesting that educational and parenting approaches should accommodate these differences rather than impose uniform standards. The panel agrees that raising boys to be emotionally intelligent, responsible, and respectful partners is crucial for a healthier society. A sobering theme is the declining birth rates among progressive women and the implications for feminism's future. Louise Perry warns that if feminism continues to devalue motherhood and family, it risks becoming infertile and unsustainable. She notes that more conservative and religious communities tend to have higher fertility rates, which could shift societal power balances. Deborah Frances-White acknowledges these demographic trends but questions the wisdom of encouraging childbearing in a world facing economic, environmental, and social crises. The panel agrees that feminism must evolve to support women's choices fully, including the choice to have children, and create conditions where family life is valued and viable. Throughout the discussion, the guests model a respectful and nuanced dialogue, acknowledging disagreements while seeking common ground. They emphasize that feminism is not monolithic and that women's experiences and desires are diverse. The conversation itself is a call to move beyond echo chambers and engage in honest, complex conversations about gender, freedom, responsibility, and societal change. Deborah Frances concludes by urging feminists to unite in the face of rising far-right threats and to build a feminism that is inclusive, maternal, and fertile, one that honors all women's choices and fosters a society where everyone can thrive.